Welcome to episode 70, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome Nel Kirkum today, founder of Pink Giraffe, and really excited to talk to her today about common agency hiring challenges, what the future of remote hybrid working looks like, new starter onboarding processes. There's lots of interesting things today. We're going to talk about people. I think it's really high on agency founders' agendas at the moment. But the first thing I want to say is a massive thanks to Santé Group for the support of our community. Without their help, we couldn't do half of what we do. So if your agency is thinking about people and any health or wellbeing cover or lifestyle and benefit choices, then contact them on nugentsanté.com or message David Booth in the community. So, and also a thank you to the team today for helping put this on. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be here without the team. Don't even know how any of the buttons work. So there you go. So Nel, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. No problem. So I think before we start, I think we're just going to get a little bit about your career background, if that's all right. Just tell us a bit how you got into the role you're doing and who you're helping with people.
Yeah, it's been a random journey. I mean, to be honest, before I went into recruitment, which was back in 2013, I was very much involved in the sports and football industry as a coach, working with children and so on. So I moved into recruitment in 2013. Absolutely, I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was something different. I love working with people, so it suited me and what I enjoyed doing, really, and did that for many years. I actually started off in social work recruitment to begin with, which was very different, quite challenging in some aspects, and then moved into an IT and technical recruitment agency, which was great. That's when I kind of found the cybersecurity space and stuff like that a little bit not for me, a little bit dull, I suppose. No offense to anyone that works in that space. So yeah, just decided to kind of venture and set up almost a business within that business called Digital Jam, where essentially what I focused on was looking at kind of developers, designers, and people within the space. And the more I started delving into that and kind of understanding it, the more I caught on to agency land and agency world. And I think it was a great eye-opener for me. I love creativity. I think if I wasn't in recruitment, I probably in hindsight should have got into marketing myself. So started kind of venturing into that agency piece and picking up some new clients across the UK, really, and then ventured away from that technical stuff more into the client services, the project management and senior level hires. It was going brilliantly. I think my manager at the time was quite impressed with the number of clients we managed to get in that space, and things were going great. And then one of our clients, Basingstoke Agency, decided to reach out and ask if I'd move in-house. And that's when the crazy stuff started, really. It was an incredible experience to go from being in your typical recruitment agency, where your clients are kind of giving you roles and off you go, to kind of being in-house and understanding just how agencies work and how the teams pull together, understanding new business, the HR side, what's in place, what might not be in place, and kind of having to look at bringing in a bit of systemization and a little bit of structure around in particular the recruitment process. So when I joined that agency, that was a bit of a kind of free-for-all. Hiring managers all had their own preferred recruiters that they were using. There was terms kind of flying all over the place, different percentages, different rebate periods, and all of this stuff. And so kind of went in to kind of get to know the managers and understand what their pain points were, and then started to formalize a recruitment process that would not only work for them but also their global teams as well.
So I think on what I'm sort of gathering here is you've got kind of a unique insight, really, and you kind of worked like not poacher turned gamekeeper, but you've definitely sat both sides of the fence, where worked for a recruitment business in this kind of space, but also in-house as well. And I know you can't name names, but I know the agency that you're talking about, and they're quite a big agency, and they kind of grew rapidly. So some of the things you're describing there are the common kind of challenges of a business growing rapidly and trying to recruit talent, and you were kind of brought in to bring some order to that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you start venturing into the world of kind of global marketing agencies, it can be even more of a minefield. And, you've got to be aware of, each country faces its own challenges. Certain markets are more complex. German market is one that is quite complex as well. So I think, it was a really good eye opener for me. It was a massive learning curve, but I'm one of those. I'm not kind of scared to throw myself in the deep end. So that's exactly what I basically did. But in the end, I think we came away with a lot more structure. They were spending well over $1 million on recruitment agency fees globally, which is a huge amount. So kind of putting in the processes.
People listening to this probably collectively won't spend $1 million on recruitment fees.
No one should be. No one should be. But I think a lot of that was not just those fees, but the ones that go wrong as well. So, if you just pass that 3-month, typical recruitment agency rebate period, you're going to go again. It's dead money.
Always the fear, I think, with most people using recruitment agents. And I think that for me, I'm not here to put recruitment agents down today. There are some very, very good ones. So we know space and we have relationships with, but there's always that fear. I sit in board meetings and people say, I've got to get a recruiter involved. It's quite an expensive fee. There's always that, what if it goes wrong? There's always that question. So I guess that's why you were kind of brought in to do the role that you do. So I'm going to move the conversation on a little bit now to talk about some of the what are the sort of common agency hiring challenges that you're kind of seeing out there at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, to be quite honest. So I think one of the traits that we see that is extremely common, and I don't know whether people realise it's happening, is being reactional, what I call reactional recruitment. Okay, so we all know, if we were to measure it, that every business and organisation naturally loses people throughout the year, whether that's because they're moving on or retiring. It could be
just to add to that, I think, when I put my kind of business plans together for clients, I always kind of build into the hiring plan a churn rate. And the comment I get back is, we hardly ever lose any churn rate. And I think I put like 15% in typically. I mean, I don't know where that sits in terms of the marketplace average, but if you're hiring, 10 people a year, then you've got to expect that, your team size at that point is probably 30 or 40 people. You are going to lose 3 or 4 people over that period. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some reason, it's something that is quite often overlooked, or it's not measured appropriately. And I think there's so many things that you can be doing to just help capture that information and give you a much more clear insight into what your turnover rates are. And also, it's good for you to know, so you understand where you sit in the market. I mean, you are right, 15% is the average. Agencies are actually slightly higher and sit normally around 18%. And sometimes, they used to be even higher than that. A couple of years ago, they were hitting like over 20%. So, we know that historically there has been perhaps a slight issue in churn within the agency environment. And, a lot of that is down to deadlines. And
it's a tough place to work. And I think, a lot of the time I see people exiting to go brand side sometimes because the agency pace of life doesn't suit them. And it isn't for everybody, but I get that's probably one of the main reasons why people move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the hardest thing is that agencies are being reactional when actually there's some things that they can look at, which is firstly understanding what your natural turnover is for employees, and also linked to that, understanding why it is they're going, exit interviews and so on, to kind of comprehend what that might be. So
we'll come back to exit interviews in a minute, because I think that's something that a lot of people, they either shy away from or they don't quite get the process right. So I think that's something worth talking about.
Yeah, that's true. So reactional, I think, is the key thing. I think we know we're pitching for new business. It's incredible how many times I speak to a client and go, what have you got in the pipeline? What's up and coming? And they're talking to me about all these amazing things. And, Yet the one thing that they're not thinking about is how and when that's going to impact on that headcount. If it's a large client, if you're working in an integrated agency, you might need all sorts. You might need a designer, you might need developers, and we all know that there's certain roles in the marketplace that are taking typically longer than others to hire. So again, we need to kind of step away from this reactional approach, and we need to start thinking a little bit more strategically with our hiring, and think about, hopefully most agencies measure their win rates and success rates when it comes to new business, and if they know that, and they know what that figure is, and they know that typically what's billable per person within that business or so on, then they should be able to account for how many people they need.
Absolutely. I think this is where you and I share a kind of alignment on this point, because in our book we talk about ABR, which is always be recruiting, and building the pipeline of talent. Because for me, one of the business is a little bit like that out there at the moment, but certainly, late 21, early 22, there was a bit of a post-COVID kind of boom, and the most common thing I heard people saying was, my ability to hit my revenue number this year is not based around my ability to sell. It's around my ability to get the people in to push the work through. And perhaps have been, not an unfair thing to say, but caught off guard a little bit in terms of the roles that they needed. So, I think totally agree with you on that point. So, going back to the exit interview point, because what sort of tips would you give around exit interviews?
I mean, firstly, do them would be one to mention, because it's incredible. Just do them. It's incredible how many people don't capture that, and it's such important information to capture. And for us, we don't have a talent arm, we have a HR arm as well. And understanding why people are leaving is really key to understanding if there is a wider issue within your agency that needs to be tackled. If you're seeing certain volumes of people leaving amongst a specific team, that could lead to something that's maybe a cultural challenge or a management challenge that needs to be overcome. So firstly, it's I think do it. I don't think there's a reason not to be when it comes to exit interviews. They've made the decision to ultimately leave. So understanding whether that is linked to salary, benefits, flexibility, management, or progression or lack of, is going to be really key for you to understand what you need to be looking to tackle in order to then retain your team. So I think to understand how to retain better, we need to be understanding the exit interview process. We need to have something that's in place where everyone's aligned, and that you can obtain some data around what is actually happening and why people are going. It's natural that people will want to leave, but you need to just identify if it's due to something specific that's happening.
I mean, for me, there is always a healthy level of churn in any business. I think, sometimes people have reached a point where they need to move on or want to move on, and that's okay. And sometimes you need to bring new people in, but you hit upon a point there, and I don't know whether I've measured this with any data or not, or whether it's one of those things that's kind of in my belief system, but for me, the number one reason it feels like people leave an agency is often the relationship with their manager. And sometimes those things are a bit swept under the carpet. So if you were in an agency doing an exit interview, who would you get to do the exit interviews?
So this is a key point, and actually I don't think it is the hiring manager that needs to do it. I think it needs to be a member of senior leadership team. Obviously, if it is a member of SLT, that's if it's someone else, that a hiring manager that's leaving and it's SLT overseeing them, then again I would look at someone like hire to that, or someone that works alongside that person, so it's a different perspective, because it's really important. But again, it's not just that exit interview, because again, things like employee reviews and understanding if there's a pattern within those can explain a lot about management and what's working and what's not as well. So you kind of, exit interviews are key, and then there's other aspects that you can pull in as well that will also help tell a story around what might be happening.
No, I agree. I mean, would you think about getting someone outside of the business to do it? I mean, from our perspective, we do look at it from a client perspective. We often get our clients to do kind of deep dive client surveys, and we'll get someone outside of the agency to do that, because the clients will often give a more honest answer if they're not talking to someone in the agency. Do you think that might work for employee exit interviews as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that we tend to do is we carry out exit interviews for several of our clients that are happy for us to do so, obviously in partnership. And it is incredible how much more you get them to open up because we're like, we're working with a client, but we're not in that office all the time with them. So ultimately they do feel that they can open up to us quite more. And we managed to collect data on that. So we actually send a specific survey out, which has got same questions, and we can then draw from that what the responses are and understand if there's patterns and why they're leaving, and then feed that back to our clients to be able to help encourage them. And even things like, actually not just on the exit interviews, but if we do employee satisfaction studies, and again, people open up more with us because we're not, they're a line manager, and they're able to kind of add pointers in. So I do think if you've got a third party that are able to help you in delivering that, or understand what the right questions are to be asking in those surveys, then absolutely, I think it's a good way to do it. So I think exit interviews, not necessarily by line management. I do agree it needs to be someone either above that, or again, if you can use someone externally, I think it's a good idea too.
Yeah, I mean, the key point we're kind of saying is it's someone else's perspective who doesn't necessarily have a very close relationship with the employee that's leaving, so they can encourage more openness and honesty.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I know, like, the other things that we're kind of thinking, I know we were talking a bit about some of the challenges agencies face, and we've mentioned the reactional thing and then exit interviews, but we all know that the last year and a half to 2 years, it's been a very candidate-driven market, which, as we know, recruitment it goes through waves of being either candidate-driven or very client-driven. And I think that the last year and a half, in particular 2 years, has been really challenging for agencies, because, as you mentioned earlier in this conversation, that there was a boom off the back end of COVID where everyone was looking to hire and has grown their teams significantly. And so I think that's a challenge in itself for agencies, because it's about how that agency cuts through the noise. So for me, that's your employer brand, that's your values, that's your progression opportunity. And I think in a candidate-driven market, that those that can shout and can be positive and put out there why their agency is the best place to go to will be the ones that ultimately win the talent. So, a lot of those challenges at the moment that agencies are facing could be overcome by some really good abilities to just bring to the forefront why they're different, what they're doing as well. So I think that's a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested to hear your views on how people do make themselves stand out, because I know when we spoke about this before, I kind of joked that 6-7 years ago, people would say, "Oh, I've got a pool table and we've got a beer fridge on Fridays." Well, I think for me, it goes a lot deeper than that now. Candidates are looking for, alignment on their own values. So, what do you think, is the sort of top few things that agencies should be doing to make themselves stand out a little bit more and attract the best talent?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's amazing how many people that we've kind of spoken to who don't, again, always be recruiting. They don't have a careers page yet. They might be a small agency that are looking to grow, but be ahead of that curve still. And I'd encourage that. So get your careers page up and running. Make sure that you've got your vision, your values, and make people feel like they can be part of that. Because I think, having purpose, having on your careers page, perhaps a case study of someone that's joined you, that's progressed through the ranks, what it's like to work for you, what they enjoy. Because quite often we can see the same things on a careers site as well. So we've got a job description, we've got a bit about the values, but we love that human piece, and it comes down to that kind of a bit like personal branding sells. Having a good case study of someone that's been employed by you that can say in their terms what they've enjoyed, how the culture is really great, because it's much more personable for people. And it's easier for us to put ourselves in their shoes then and think about those things. So, when we talk about employer brand, we don't just simply mean the careers page with some job descriptions. We want, we look for a lot more than that. And actually, candidates more now than ever, because it's a competitive market and because there's opportunities available to them, they want to understand more about the client bases. They want to understand more about the projects, because it's the work that interests them too. So yes, value alignment is critical, and we're very much culture to us is one of the most important things when we look to support our clients. You know, we feel that we need that value alignment, cultural alignment to help our clients get to the right people.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to be doing with employer brand is you need to just, it's not all about benefits anymore. It's about so much more than that. It's about case studying some of the great stuff that you're doing and you're delivering as a team. Because a lot of people, especially in, you know, creative, they want to be working on all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, from my perspective, certainly pay and benefits, I think, you know, it's very hard to differentiate yourselves now in the marketplace. I mean, one of the things that we're not an agency, but one of the things we've done to differentiate ourselves as a business is go with, well, let me just give everyone 42 days holiday a year plus bank holidays.
Right.
And that is, you know, it's consultancy is not easy. You know, sometimes long hours, it's stressful, and we recognise that by saying, let's give you more time off. And that's one thing that's made us kind of stand out.
Yeah.
You know, the birthdays off and the volunteering days and things like that agencies doing, more and more people are doing that now.
Yeah.
So it becomes harder to make yourself stand out in terms of those benefits. So it does cut down, as you rightly say, more to around what is the culture like business. Am I going to enjoy working here? What are my peers going to be like? What are the clients going to be working on going to be like? Which kind of leads me on to, there's one of the things that we when we did our notes here before was talking about Glassdoor. How useful or not that can be. So have you got any tips, stories around the utilisation of Glassdoor at all?
So the first thing I'd say about Glassdoor is it's not going to be dissimilar really in you going...
Your reaction, is this where you go on a monologue now for half an hour?
If you think about it, if you go to a restaurant and you go and leave a review, right? What do we like to do as Brits? We like to have a good moan. Yeah, we love a moan. So, you know, don't think that Glassdoor, you've got to be, as an employer, I would say, be confident that you're going to be in a good position for it. I mean, it's a difficult one. I think Glassdoor could prove very valuable if they adjusted what they did in terms of making sure there was background checks on the people, so that people couldn't leave continually bad reviews if they, for example, didn't pass probation and were they were released. That gives them that ammo to leave these reviews. So I think Glassdoor, I think it could be great. I think that you need to be mindful as an employer if you're going to go and set an account up. You know, we all know that at some point in our agency there have been people that probably haven't worked out. So that's something you need to bear in mind, I think, before using it. And equally, I think candidates need to be bearing in mind that you cannot believe everything that you review, because ultimately what one person's pain point is and what they don't agree with or like, another person's happy with, because we're not the same as individuals anyway. So it's two aspects. One is, as a client, I think some of the worst things that I've seen is probably when they go and do it, they end up with some really poor reviews from previous people for whatever reason. And they've then got the whole team to counterbalance that with all these positive reviews that say similar things. It just becomes really apparent, which I think in a way is worse. So I think you need to be, I think it could be a good tool if used correctly, but I think that actually you are at risk, because I don't think that, you know, they don't vet who it is making those comments, and there's nothing stopping you setting up multiple accounts. So as an employer, I'd be aware of it. And as a candidate, yes, by all means, you can form that as part of your research on an agency, but always be open-minded, because it is different. Different people tolerate different things and like different ways of working. So it's not a case of one size fits all.
No, I mean, we've all had a job in the past that we hated, but that somebody else did. So it does come down very much to the individual.
Yeah.
So going back to the ABR, the always be recruiting point, there's a couple of things here that I wanted to sort of discuss with you. I'm a big fan of always having, you know, certain roles on the website, on the page, because, you know, we're trying to build this, you know, this pipeline of talent. And also, you know, the idea really is, you're trying to grow your business, you do need a certain number of players in the team. And we talked about playing the long game with those people. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, obviously a couple of things that you touched on. Always be recruiting is 100% something that I'm always encouraging people to do. You know, if you've got a careers page and you've got on there a bit about your culture and values, do put up the roles that you struggle with mostly. Try and do something different with it. Maybe not just a job description, but maybe use a video or a case study again to show like that. So I think that's really important to if you know it's a role that you've typically struggled to recruit in the past, or one where you're heading towards that growth and it's going to be a dead cert that you need that person, then 100% put them on your website. What I don't advise is going and then rolling out loads of adverts when you don't need them yet on other channels, because then what will happen is you probably won't respond to them and you're going to give a bad kind of candidate experience ultimately.
Yeah. So which is the next thing we need to talk about, actually, candidate experience. It's such a hard balance to build a pipeline of talent. And when we talk about the ABR, the always be recruiting approach, it's not that you're interviewing then hiring. It's about the building relationship piece with, you know, potential candidates for the future.
Yeah, 100%. So one, you know, it's quite often, and it's easy for us to do because we're doing it day in, day out, obviously. But one thing that we'll do is just, you know, if we speak to a candidate and they say that they're happy in their role, they've just started a new role, I will always reach back out within 3 to 6 months to say, hey, how's it going? Now, that goes quite a long way with a candidate, because one, you've thought to check in, so it sets you apart to others that have gone out and they're not interested, they've got a new role, but you're kind of engaging with them all the time. Now there's some people that I've spoken to over the course of 2 to 3 years that I've yet to kind of place somewhere, but we've got a good relationship and they'll always come to me and say, what have you got available? And I think what we could do, or what agencies could do that are looking to hire directly themselves, is think about that. Think about who in your network is going to be right to connect with, who's got the right experience, and just understand that if they're not looking now, it doesn't mean that they might not be soon. So definitely keep them engaged. The other quick win for agencies that are looking to hire directly themselves is to think about your recruitment process, and when you have people apply, how you look to store their information. And for example, if they've interviewed 2 stages and then they didn't get the final offer, they were pipped to the post by someone else. If they still did a good job, make sure you've recorded those interview notes. Make sure that you've got some secure place for that candidate CV and those notes to go, because next time you hire, if they were a close second, go back out and reach out to them, because one, it's going to speed your process up the second time round, because you've already engaged with someone that you thought was good, but it was tough to choose between the two. And hopefully you've kept them warm and engaged. Put them on a database and send them an email or newsletter about your company and what you've been up to and the client wins, because all of those little things are keeping you in the forefront of that candidate's mind.
Yeah, that's genius. I like that.
So yeah, think like the hiring long game is about growing your network, engaging with people, checking in with people. Don't overdo it, but just have that touch point with them and ask how things are going and are they still enjoying their role, what have they been up to. And also kind of, there's other things that are great. This, interview process, for example, we've got a client that asks them what their 3 favorite things are to eat or what they enjoy. And then when they get the job, they prepare that as part of their onboarding.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's a little touch, but it's a really nice one.
I'm not going to do that here, because now that people listen to this, they're all going to put lobster, Chateaubriand.
Probably, yeah.
It'd be crazy. But if they do have it, then hopefully we can do this in some kind of office environment I get to enjoy. But
Yeah. And also, if they don't get the job and you've asked that as part of your interview process, you can just send them a Mars bar and say, hey, how's your job going? So it's win-win. Doesn't have to be lobster.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, I mean, coming back to this, we're playing the long game and building this pipeline of talent. The thing I just want to sort of round off this piece with, and I think you touched on this at the beginning, is people often, agency owners, agency founders, perhaps their finance and ops teams aren't mapping out far enough in terms of the growth rate and the headcount and the kind of org charts that they need. I think one of the things that, and Spencer and I always laugh about this, because there were some things we did right, but there was a lot we did wrong, which is why we've gone into consultancy. We're learning from those things all the time and, sharing those mistakes from the past so other people don't make them. But one of the things we did do right was kind of mapping out what the business looked like at every kind of 250,000 of revenue run rate going. So we always knew that we were going into the last quarter of the year, and the plan was to grow the revenue, and 250,000 meant 2 or 3 more hires. We always knew who those people would be.
Yeah.
So it was easier for us to get this head start on the ABR thing and say, okay, well, it's 2 fee account manager. Okay, well, those are roles that, you know, should be relatively easy to find. But you spoke earlier about roles that are difficult to find, and one of the roles that we found difficult time were project managers back in the day. So we always knew that we had to have a longer lead time for good project managers. So always worth thinking about those things as well.
It is. And I think the other thing linked to that is quite often, like, so last year was manic. Everyone was hiring. I think this year is very much a year of stability and looking at, you know, performance amongst our team and making sure utilization rates are good and stuff like that. So I think quite often as well, sometimes we can, if we're not forward planning, we can put our finger in the air and choose completely the wrong role that we're not going to need because we're not understanding utilization, or we're not measuring performance in our team, or doing you know, reviews or succession planning. So if all those things are in place, it would become a bit easier because you train from within. And I think that's something that, again, I don't think, not all agencies, but I don't think we're there yet with what we could be doing in that space. And, you know, an example of that is graduate schemes. There's not many. I mean, large agencies do roll them out. They offer placements, university placements. And actually, it's the smaller growing agencies that can get overlooked in that area and miss out on the future generations of talent coming through. And I think that that's something that needs improving on. And I think placement years are a great way of being able to get people into your organization. And actually, if you give them that opportunity, normally once they finish their degree, you're the first person they're going to think about.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think that succession planning has a lot to do with people also not being sure what to map out for the future, because they're probably not looking at that as well. Whereas actually, if you know those roles are difficult to hire, do more with your succession planning, do more with your training and development, so that becomes less of an issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. So actually had a question from James Marshall. Thank you, James, which was about, it's a pretty similar topic. So I was about to move on to, in terms of the hiring process. James is saying, as an agency employer, when I'm working with a recruiter, what should I do to make sure I'm getting access to a diverse talent pool?
So yeah, that's a really good question. I think the key when you establish any recruiter relationship is to actually firstly get to know them and understand it. As a recruiter, our job is to make sure that we are always providing a diverse and eclectic mix of candidates for roles. So, you know, one thing that we do know in the market is that still, you know, people with ADHD or disabilities, whatever it might be, are still not as prominent within the marketplace. And that's a massive area that we need to improve on. And I think what recruiters should be doing, and again, this is a difficult one, because if they're a recruitment agency, they might not have had that in-house experience to kind of guide. And that's difficult, because I learned a lot from being in that in-house role. But I think, you know, having a recruitment process in place will help with inclusion, because firstly, it's making sure it's a fair process and that everyone is treated equally. The other thing is understanding. So for me, one thing that's quite often overlooked, and again, it's a tip for anyone that's hiring themselves, is if you put a job ad out or you've got something out and you've got an applicant, don't just arrange an interview with them on email. You need to pick up the phone to that person. And even if it's a 15-minute phone call, just to find out why they're leaving their role and what they're looking for. And if they've got any needs for, if they need support in any areas. For example, I've got people that work with us that suffer with dyslexia, and I know they take a little longer to do tasks. So understanding who they are in the process. So when you're getting CVs from recruiters, make sure that if you know, you take the time to probably have a quick call to understand if they need anything, any reasonable adjustments and stuff like that. Because I think quite often people are nervous about applying for roles because they worry about these things. Whereas if we can start getting people to ask the right questions, or we ask the right questions to understand that, we're automatically becoming more inclusive in our process, because we understand what we need to do to help those people. So hopefully that kind of makes sense.
No, I think that makes total sense. I think, when we chatted before about this, I think we both had, that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, because taking the obvious ability, perhaps coming for an interview somewhere, are we prepared for that person? Have we had a conversation with them, asking them what their needs are, if they need any support, etc.? Is our workplace even geared up for that kind of thing? So that's
really
an one to me, that and you make the point about dyslexia and ADHD, where those people are often super creative as well, and you want those people in your agency. But if we haven't got a hiring process that makes them feel inclusive, then we're not going to attract that talent.
Exactly that, and it's just kind of understanding the differences. I mean, so often those with ADHD struggle to be on time to things like that. That's a trait. So maybe what we need to start looking at is understanding that as a business, and maybe navigating that and how we use things. As I know for a fact that even people outside of those kind of neurodiverse that others still, I often speak to developers that don't want to just do 9 till 5 because they like to problem solve. And if they come across a challenge, they like to go away and come back to it in the evening, right? So, I think to be more inclusive, we probably need to look at being more flexible a little bit as well, because I would argue that some of that goes hand in hand too, to be honest. And I think we need to just make sure that there is a process in place that works, but I think we need to ask the right questions to understand if we need to adjust that process to be more accommodating.
Yeah, totally agree. And then speaking of, just moving on from the kind of the candidate experience, talking more about the workplace now, how are you finding agencies managing cultures where they've either been remote and they're coming to a hybrid model, or they're in the kind of office-based environment of finding that more people are wanting more flexibility? How are agencies dealing with that at the moment?
Yeah, so to be honest, it's quite mixed. I mean, a majority of the agencies that we're working with are set on hybrid working, and I personally, I think that's great. It is beneficial. I think what I'm noticing more and more is that it can come down to various things like agency type, job role, individuals, and I think that it's easy to say, oh, we're hybrid working, we're flexible, we do these 3 days a week. Well, to some that isn't flexible. That's not giving them what they need. So I think we're in an interesting landscape where, I went on a webinar recently, and it's becoming apparent that universities and colleges are starting to do more and more remote. So if Gen Alpha that are at school now experience things fully remote more and more, that's going to navigate the future landscape for businesses, because it will become all they've ever known. Technology's always been there. There's not been that need. And I think, I completely think it's beneficial. I think especially creative agencies, that collaboration piece is really important. It's where the magic happens ultimately. So I think that's really key. But I think we also need to be aware that I think there is going to be more need to look at people on an individual and a case by case basis. And I'm not saying that you do one rule for one and one for the other, but you've got to navigate what's around in the market. You've got to navigate who's available in the market, and if it is competitive, I think that flexibility is what will set people apart. And I honestly think that we notice kind of certain patterns when speaking to candidates, and certain roles in particular, they're all for it, and other roles they want to be in. So again, you can almost personality profile people into certain roles through it, because it becomes really clear that certain, which job roles and people are more passionate about being remote in and being in with. So I think hybrid is definitely the most popular way at the moment. For me, I think it's going to stay hybrid. Something like 22% of people are looking for fully remote still. So that's still 1/5 of the marketplace as it stands at the moment. That's still a good amount of people. What I would love to know from that data is how many of them are in technical roles or like dev roles, because I think that impacts as well on them.
As you were saying about different job roles earlier, I was kind of thinking, if I take one of my bigger agency clients who kind of do software development, but also creative. They've got a strategy team as well. You know, the creative and the strategy team probably need to be together a fair amount. As you said, that's where the magic happens, when people get together. But the dev roles, I mean, not to be too broad brush about it, but the majority of them are quite happy to sit anywhere with headphones on and just crack on and code. So some of them are probably thinking, well, what do I need to go to an office? You know, so it would be
interesting. And I do notice that. I mean, sometimes even when we say, you know, once a month for collaboration, you get a couple that go, oh, you know, I'm quite happy. And that's that. And, you know, I think a lot of the time that, you know, the roles we go into as people and personalities differ. And the role of a client services person as well to part from a dev. And I think actually what I would encourage is people that haven't yet done it with their teams, look at personality profiling and understand if there's any patterns within that. And often you'll find there will be, that certain people sit within certain job roles within an organization that have certain personality traits or skills. So that's quite good way of understanding your team dynamic. And again, it can help you almost decide the type of person that's needed within a role that would work well with others as well.
Yeah, absolutely.